Hello, welcome to Simcha, a celebration of life. I'm your host, Nikki Wellman. Ruth Messanger, president of the American Jewish World Services, was recently in South Africa. Her organization helps hundreds of grassroots NGOs all over the world with funding and education. Recently, Simcha spent a day with her in Cape Town, visiting some of the local projects to see how they're developing.
The Jewish faith really talks in terms of responsibility. It doesn't talk so much in terms of rights, which is modern day language. It talks in terms of responsibility. So Jews are told that they have an obligation to take care of the other and the stranger. That means very specifically today, it seems to us, people not ourselves, not other Jews, and not people in our own country. It means people in the world who need help. So there's taking care of the other and the stranger. But Jews are also told, do what you can to pursue justice. Now, I take those two words very seriously. In Hebrew, the direct translation from the Hebrew is justice, justice shall you pursue. So they say the word twice, and they say pursue. So pursue is not the most obvious word. It doesn't say be just. It doesn't say fair. It doesn't say create justice. It says pursue it. And in my mind, at least, that really means there needs to be an aggressive forward effort. Look for where things are inequitable or unjust, and then proceed to try to help make them better. Our mission is to address the worst problems of poverty, disease, and hunger in the developing world, and to do that work through existing small grassroots organizations that are already in country, that are led by local people, that are making positive change. Our second half of our mission, which is to educate throughout the Jewish community about global responsibility. So to suggest to all of our supporters and our potential supporters that they have an obligation to help us address these problems internationally. We've now grown to a point where we're working in 34 countries. We help 450 small grassroots organizations. None of those organizations are Jewish. They are local people. They are indigenous Indians in Peru. They are people working in the townships in South Africa. We find out what people are doing, and we work with them. But we do this work according to Jewish values and Jewish obligation. So we basically have 4 program areas. So the largest one is our grant making. But even with our small projects on the ground, it's not just giving them funds. It's also providing them with technical assistance and sometimes with skilled volunteers. So a second piece of our program is our service program. Our service program sometimes sends skilled professionals, but we also send every year into the field about 300 high school and college students. They are a help to the project. They may be building latrines. They may be laying the platform for a community library. But we also send them to change themselves because we want them to see the dimensions of global poverty. We want them to know that the world doesn't look like it does outside their front door. And we want them to understand that they can do something about it, and not just that they can do something about it while they're there, but that they can come back to America. They can talk to their fellow students. They can talk to their families. They can talk in their religious congregation. And they can advertise the fact that there is Jewish work to be done with non-Jews all over the world. In our volunteer program, both the adult skilled volunteer program and the student program, we take people from all over the world. Now, we only take Jews, but that's because one of the dimensions of our work is education. And our material for our volunteers is designed partly just so they understand the issue of agriculture around the world, but partly so they also understand Jewish text, Jewish commentary, Jewish obligation. So Judaism doesn't proselytize. So I'm not recruiting volunteers who aren't Jewish. But the Jewish volunteers that I recruit can come from any place in the world. Ikamva Bantu is one of American Jewish World Service partners, but it's a really unusual one in many ways. It's quite large. Ikamva works in many different townships. Ikamva has education programs and health center programs and multi-service centers and creches and foster grandparents. It's got I want to say a unique story, especially for South Africans and especially for the Jewish community in South Africa, because Helen Lieberman began this work as a lone soldier for justice in the townships when apartheid was in place and when literally her most basic outreach or service activities were at great risk and danger to herself, and occasionally ended her up in jail. Helen would insist that I say, and it's true, that she did none of her work alone. She found women in the townships, just like I now find people all over the world. She found the mamas and made partnerships with them. They are the people who told her where the worst problem was in this township. They are the people who suggested to her what might be done next. But in an unusual story, Helen did this for a couple of decades before the end of apartheid. And then in the mid-90s, she turned this into an organization, Ikamva Bantu, the future of our people, the future of our nation. And she's just continued to build and build and build. So Helen's put together funding from all kinds of places. At American Jewish World Service, to be honest with you, we consider it a privilege to continue partnering with Helen, sometimes, not often enough, to find a special donor for one of her projects, because quite frankly, this is a showcase organization. I love to bring people to see and learn about this organization. Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel, whom I was privileged to know when I was growing up, once observed that in a free society, so that's a democracy like the United States, like South Africa, in a free society where terrible wrongs exist, some are guilty, but all are responsible. And so for me, that's a critical Jewish belief. But then I would add to that, or supplement that, with an observation from Pirkei Avot, a book called The Wisdom of Our Fathers, which says, remember, you are not obligated to complete the task, but you can't refuse to participate. So do what you can, exercise responsibility to try to improve the world.
This year we celebrated the 10th anniversary of the annual Yiddish festival. Ich denk aheim, I long for home, was written along with many other songs in the Vilna ghetto by Lieb Rosenthal. Newcomer to the festival and singing in Yiddish for the first time, Zola Schumann, Lieb Rosenthal's niece, had the audience spellbound with her rendition of this powerful song. Enjoy.
Wenn Mensch bist jung, is groß dein Schwung. When you are young, desire burns. You leave the nest and learn to fly, only to find you can't return. Verlost, vergesst dein Heim, dein Nest. Die Zeit kommt nicht zurück. Tust du sich der Mann, you start thinking of the time goes by. Was ist geschehen? Ich will noch einmal sehen mein Heim. Es ist noch als dort wie gewesen. Für Wind, a Tischel and a chair, I left my childhood over there. Ich bin heim. I long to see my home again, just as it used to be back then. My Schwester's paintings on the wall, the rug I tripped on in the hall. Mein Ormheim. I long to see my home again. The piano we all played back then. My mama's flowers she would grow, my tata's favorite radio. Ich bin geheim. The steps on which I scraped my knee, the wooden gate, the lemon tree. These precious memories I keep, weil die Zeit kommt nicht zurück. Ich